Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Oval Office. Who hasn't had that fantasy? This desk, power station of the world? Well, I say let Joe Biden have his job. I think that would be a little bit too stressful for this guy. Anyway, it's been a couple weeks since we've been together, and maybe you've been wondering why. I'll bet you know. It's because I got married to the lovely Catherine. That was on Sunday, November the 21st. We spent a couple of nights here at home and then left for lovely Hawaii. We spent a week on the island of Kauai. They said the only way to see the island is by motorcycle, and I believed them. So I rented a Harley Davidson. That's how we got around. We got to see a lot of the island. It was beautiful. The weather was lovely. We had a tremendous time. And it was just such a perfect ending to a perfect sort of fairy tale, fantasy type romance that's been our relationship. I've enjoyed sharing tidbits with you along the way, and it's exciting to give First Alameda what they have so longed for, a First Lady. You're welcome. And she's a good one. She's excited about the role. So looking forward to getting to know you better in the years to come, and hopefully in the weeks to come. We had a great reception here on, what was that, December, well, it was last Sunday, whatever that was, December 5th. December 5th, my crewman from the other room says. Thank you, Devin. All right, so got married, the kids were here, my kids were all here, her sisters were all here, our folks were gathered. It was just an incredible wedding day, and we were so grateful to be able to celebrate our love with our family, and so great to celebrate with you then the following week. And as far as we're concerned, the party is going to continue because the honeymoon never ends, right? That's what they told us. Anyway, it's been a whirlwind, back into work, and caught a little bit of a cold, so if you're watching from home, lucky for you. Actually, I did just finally get another COVID test, and fortunately it was negative, but this cough that I've had since I got back has been holding on, and I know you're really excited about that. Hey, something I would like to invite you to be praying about. If you're not aware, our former interim pastor here, Linda Bergeon, her son Eric, very young man, suffered from a stroke recently. So please be in prayer for Linda, and this might be a great time to just reach out if you've got her information and let her know that we're thinking about her here at First Baptist, and we're praying for her, praying for Eric during this challenging time. So it is beginning to look a lot like Christmas. We are in the second week of Advent. Advent is a Latin word for coming. It's a time that we traditionally set aside to prepare ourselves for the season of Christmas, for the Christ of Christmas. What I've chosen to do in these 3 weeks with you is to look at the beginning of John's Gospel, John chapter 1, beginning in verse 1 and going through verse 18. And this is probably a poem or an early song that was already in circulation in the church that John, the Gospel writer, weaved into and used as the launch pad for his Gospel. John's Gospel, very different than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Or different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is unique. It was written much later. It was written to a different mindset, a different sensibility. It was written to people who maintained there was a great deal of difference between the natural, or that which consists in matter, and the supernatural, or the otherworldly, and made sharp distinctions between that. And of course we know that those are false distinctions, because those realms, the physical and the spiritual, easily blend in and out of one another, and preeminently they do so in the person of Jesus Christ. So what we're looking at today, in particular, verses 1 through 5, is the Christ of Christmas. Who is this Jesus? When we celebrate Christmas, We're talking about going back, far before Bethlehem's manger, to the beginning of all things. John begins his gospel with a similar refrain, but we know it well from Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, what? God. In the beginning, according to Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth. We come to John's gospel, and we hear that same refrain. In the beginning was the Word. The Word here, the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's staggering. There's so much to unpack here. But we're talking about the beginning of all things, the beginning of the beginning, actually the beginning before the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. In that beginning was the Word. And so when we skip down to verse 14 and read that the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we've seen His glory, the glory of the Father's only Son, gives us the indication that the Logos, or the Word that was with God in the beginning, is none other than Jesus, or more precisely, the Christ, whom later came to be identified as the human person, Jesus, at the Christmas that we think about. But before we think about the Christmas that we think about, we have to think about the eons of Christmases that preceded it, going all the way back to the beginning and realizing that in that beginning the Word was. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was. This is a statement of existence. To help us with this, we have the Old Testament concept of God as the I Am. When God is questioned, what is your name? That's what God says, I am. When Moses says, who shall I say is sending me to the people? God says, I am who I am. It's a statement of God's existence. And Jesus, interestingly, picked up on this same statement of existence in the gospel record when the people came to him and said, just who do you think you are? Jesus said, I am. And to demonstrate that he knew exactly what he was talking about, and that he was making a claim to divinity here, the line that follows is the Jews took up stones to stone him. They were going to execute him because they knew well that he was making a statement of absolute divinity. Jesus was saying, look, I'm God. That's kind of a big deal to the Jewish sensibility. There's one God, right? And here comes Jesus on the scene claiming that he too is God, or he as well is God, or as the Father is, so is he. So in the beginning the Word was, and the Word was with God, and the third phrase, the Word was God. It's like an equal statement if you're making a mathematical sentence, I suppose. You have God equals the Word equals God. They are the same thing. The Nicene Creed said they are of the same essence, the Father and the Son. They're one and the same. So the Word was, Jesus, the Christ, was in the beginning with God, was in the beginning God Himself. Whew. It's deep stuff. You see why we're going back before Bethlehem. He was in the beginning with God, verse 2. Now, verse 3 says, all things came into being through Him, and without Him not one thing came into being. So the Word, in addition to being present with God in the beginning, in addition to being God in the beginning, the Word is here described in verse 3 as the source or the agency of creation. And here again, much of the New Testament, in fact all of the New Testament, concurs with this as we read Paul's letter to the church at Colossae. He talks about Jesus being active, or Christ being active in the agency of creation. Describing Him, Paul wrote, He is the image of the invisible God. This is Colossians 1:15. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. That's pretty clear language. Colossians 1:15 through 18. That Christ, the divine one, the Word, was present with God in the beginning, and through him everything that came into being was created. Christ was active in the agency of creation. The Word was, and the Word was life. The Word was the source of all that we know and experience as alive, as life today. Verse 4. In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. There's two concepts now that merge: the life, or the active force of creation, and is also likened metaphorically and literally to light. Jesus is life, Jesus is light. It's what he meant later in John's Gospel when Jesus stood before the people and said, I am the light of the world. He said that at the Festival of Lights of all places. He made the claim to absolute divinity. I am the light of the world. He doesn't say I'm like the light, or I'm in the light, or I've aligned my life with the light somehow. He said, I am the light of the world. There's that phrase again, that sense of being. I am, I exist, as light, as life. And you and I know, as the writer wraps up in verse 5, that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The darkness cannot overcome it, has no hope of overcoming it, because light triumphs over darkness. That's the beauty of the Christmas message. It's interesting that so much of Christmas is about lights, lighted trees, lighted homes, lighted street poles, lighted billboards, everything lighted. Jesus is life and light. He is the light of the world. And that merging of light and darkness is what we see in the incarnation. And chapter 1 and verse 14, that word that was life and light and triumphing over darkness, that word became flesh and lived among us. That's what we're interested in at Christmas, is this merging of natures, the human and the divine. It happened in time and space. It happened at the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. When Jesus was born, he was merged with the divine nature. Yeah, I'll let you think about that. That's beautiful. The coming together of man and of God. And again, we have this image, I think, of Jesus as an omniscient, omnipotent infant lying in the cradle, knowing the mysteries and the depth of the universe. I think it was different than that. I think there was in Jesus the experience of messianic awareness that happened over the course of his lifetime. I think the gospel record bears that out, and I think it's something fascinating to look at and to think about. Is Jesus coming to terms with his divinity? It's what he was looking for when he was searching in the wilderness and studying under his cousin John the Baptist. It's what he was steeling himself for and against in terms of the wilderness and the temptation and the time of fasting and the testing and discerning what is and what is not. I feel like all of that was Jesus coming to terms with who he was. For us, for our purposes, we know that it happened. The Word became flesh. God and man united in the person of Jesus Christ, and it's in that person that we have hope. It's in that person that we have light and life. And it's in that personal relationship that hopefully we are willing to nurture a growing friendship with Jesus the Christ. That's our aim, and that's our opportunity this Christmas season. May that be your experience in an increasing way as these weeks of Advent are an opportunity for us to sink our roots down and to become more deeply aware and intentional of our own divine nature, of the mystery of God in me, the hope of glory. What does that mean for us to live from the divine center? What does it mean that the Holy Spirit of God dwells within us? These are the thoughts that ought to fill our head. These ought to be the sugar plums and fairies that dance for us. Well, there's a lot else to that story, but I'll leave you to think about that. My friends, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you his peace. Amen.